So I have a promo for us to do for Popping Collars, but I was too lazy to write something, so I had AI write it for us.
Oh no. I can't wait to do this.
What's all this direction?
There's a lot of direction.
There's a lot of adverbs.
The AI really wants us to work hard on this. Here I go, enthusiastically. Welcome to Popping Collars, podcast where religion and pop culture collide in the most unexpected ways. Join Greg, I guess me, join me, Betsy, Liz, and Ricardo as they explore everything from the profound to the playful with a little twist of mystery, literature, music, and drama. We're diving into the spiritual side of true crime novels. Liz, did you get into our algorithm here? How do faith and morality play out in the darkest stories?
Ever wondered if Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities has deeper religious themes? We'll break it down and maybe even compare it to a Pearl Jam song or two.
Whoa, they know us.
And when we dive into British period dramas like Downton Abbey or The Crown, we're asking, how do faith, power, and class intersect in those worlds? And that's true. We did do that.
It's not just about the big questions. We're also taking pop culture icons and how they tackle faith, redemption, and the meaning of life.
Do you want to do that again? Because I don't think we're taking the pop culture icons. We're talking about the pop culture.
I was busy being cheerful.
Yeah, he's really working hard.
So, brightly. I don't know what brightly means, so I'll just say it this way. So, whether you're into mysteries, literature, rock anthems, or Victorian tea parties, oh, this is so Anglican. Popping Collars has something for everyone. Subscribe now and join us every week for a fun, thoughtful ride.
That was great.
What a promo. Hello, everyone. My name's Greg Knight, and I like watching, thinking about, and talking about books. Do I like watching books or reading books? Let's change that to I like reading, thinking about, and talking about books. One of the great things about starting your own podcast is that there are some days where you actually get to talk to one of the authors of those books, and this is one of those days. This month, I got the chance to interview Tony Jones, the man behind the memoir, The God of Wild Places, Rediscovering the Divine in the Untamed Outdoors. Goodreads will tell you this plot description. A pastor walks out of the church and into the woods in pursuit of the God he's lost. Millions of Americans disillusioned with organized religion yearn for meaning and transcendence in their lives, and many of them are finding that in nature. When pastor and theologian Tony Jones had his crisis of faith brought on by personal trauma and broken relationships, he sought solace in the outdoors, paddling a canoe, hunting with his dog, butchering deer. In The God of Wild Places, Tony mines his own experiences, recent research in evolutionary psychology, and ancient wisdom from various spiritual and philosophical traditions to fashion lessons about solitude, the predator-prey relationship, the importance of place, risk, failure, and death, and the chaotic presence of God. End quote. What I'll tell you is that I think Tony's interests bleed into some of the themes we've been discussing on our Pilgrimage Project series, where religious seekers are increasingly looking outside of church walls for meaning and connection. I'll also say that Tony is a past guest on our show, a good friend of my pod partner, Ryan Parker, and a thoughtful and insightful spiritual thinker who I don't think suffers a lot of nonsense easily. Conversations with Tony are where Christian platitudes go to die. In addition to writing this memoir, Tony's written a dozen other books, including Did God Kill Jesus and The Sacred Way, spiritual practices for everyday life. He hosts the Reverend Hunter podcast and teaches at Fuller Theological Seminary. He served as a consultant on the television show The Path, and he owns an event planning company, Crucible Creative. Well, that's pretty cool. He holds an AB from Dartmouth College, an MDiv from Fuller Seminary, and a PhD from Princeton Theological Seminary. And he currently resides in Edina, Minnesota, which is where I had this conversation with him. So what happens when a pastor ditches the traditional path of ministry for a road less traveled in the Minnesota woods? Find out when I keep things under the stole with Tony Jones. But first, here's Tony giving a quick promo for his book.
When I went through some difficult times, I found myself connecting with God less and less indoors, including inside of a church, and more outdoors. When I was doing the activities that grounded me and centered me, like hunting and fishing and canoeing and hiking, those were the things that kept calling me back to the wild places to meet God.
My first question is actually really easy, which is why is now was the time to write this book?
Well, I didn't really decide now was the time to write it. I'd been writing it for a dozen years on and off. And it had gone through different iterations. I'd had 2 different literary agents working with me on it. I pitched it to publishers. Nobody liked it. I worked on it some more. My agent left me, got a new agent, pitched it some more, So it was a long process. Mary Karr, who's one of the great American memoirists, in her book on memoir, on how to write memoir, called The Art of Memoir, she says you shouldn't write about anything till it's 8 years in the past. Which so many of us totally ignore, that advice. But it turns out it's really good advice, because having a little more space between the events and my reflection on the events, I think probably helped a lot make it a better book. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard people say similar things about like Academy Awards and stuff like that. It's like, how are you going to really know what the best movie was, like, right away? Come on.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? I mean, how many movies do we look at that think that movie endured in a way that the Academy Award movie from that, like the Oscar winner from that year, did not endure?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So let's just say that's what's going to happen with my book.
That's right.
It's going to have a long tail. People are still going to be buying it 20 years from now. Let's just say that. Let's just manifest that in the universe.
Sounds good to me. I will say this. I do think that you're onto something with the 8-year thing, because I think that there's a level of honesty that you need in order to talk about some of the things that you talk about in the book. And this is something that I rarely do. After I got done, I started reading the pull quotes from the reviews, like on the cover jacket and stuff like that. And that word honest like shows up a lot in people that review your book. When you hear that word honest about this book, like, what do you read between the lines there? What do you think they're saying about it?
I think people were surprised at how vulnerable I was about myself, how self-effacing I was in the book. I think that's probably it. I think people, most of those people who blurbed it know me personally and have interacted with me over the last 30 years in my life in the church, and I'm an Enneagram 8, and I come across as very like strong and confident and bullish on my own opinions. Like, I'm very bullish on myself, it seems to people. So then when they open the pages of a book and they read me writing about my feelings of insecurity and my experiences with failure in my life and my marriage and stuff like that, I think people were a little bit like, oh damn, I didn't see that coming. So then that I think that word honest is a reflection of that.
Do you think there's a natural false front that we put up as religious thinkers
educators,
Yeah,
religious
for sure. I mean, my gosh, yeah, for sure, for sure. I think I won't name names, but I know I've known a lot of pretty famous Christian authors over the years, and even the ones who are, well, like let's just take one that's very public, like Brennan Manning,
Mhm.
who very publicly wrote about his alcoholism and kind of like beating his alcoholism, and then clearly had not beaten his alcoholism, and
Right.
was drinking while he was traveling on speaking gigs, and coming on stage drunk, and like really, really struggling with his addiction. And people knew him as like, oh, he's the guy, he's the grace guy. Like his whole message is grace. And yet if you knew him even a little bit, you knew he had no grace with himself. Like he had a lot of self-loathing.
Yeah.
And I could name other, even more famous Christian authors who had that similar message of grace, but really it was like they were preaching to themselves, like we so often do.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I was about to ask, what do you think those masks are about? Like, because you'd think like, well, it's about protecting what it is that I have. I don't want to lose what I have, but that idea of like convincing yourself of your own sort of goodness, I think, is part
Yeah,
of
it's a combination, of course. I mean, for any of us who make a living off of our ministry, there's a lot to lose, which I found out firsthand. You can lose everything if people find out your peccadillos or whatever. And so there's that, but it's just like a common, like, look, this goes back to ancient Greek drama. There's a reason that the drama mask and the comedy mask are the two like ancient archetypal symbols of theater, because obviously even the ancients understood that masking is a lot of what we do as human beings.
hmm Yeah. What do you think the seed was that made you think, I think there's a book here? Like, I'm going out in the woods, I'm starting to connect to something that feels real. Like when was the inkling like, I think that there's something that other people can connect to here?
It was more like I need to write my story for myself, and I don't know if there's a redemptive message in my story for anybody else. I think one of the things about memoir that's so different from all the other books I've written, all the other books had an audience in mind. Like, I'm going to write a book about the emerging church movement, and it's going to be really helpful for a lot of pastors who are very threatened by it and don't understand it. Or I'm going to write a book about prayer. I'm going to write a book about the atonement. It's going to help people. I don't think that's the way to approach memoir. At least it wasn't for me. The way I approached it was like, I'm going to tell a story of my life, a story, not the story, but part of the story. And I'm going to try to draw themes out. I think that's what a memoir does, is it draws themes out of your life. And the theme that kept emerging in my life as I wrote about it was how much solace I found in the outdoors that I used to find in the church. And so that was like the overarching theme. And then the chapters kind of like multiple times I would build a house and then I would show it to my agent and she'd be like, yeah, you weren't supposed to build a Rambler. You were supposed to build a Colonial. And so then I would go and I'd start over. But in this analogy, I could go back into the old house I'd already built and be like, okay, now that I've framed up a Colonial, I can like go get some sheetrock out of the old house. And, I could like use those light fixtures and the ceiling fans or whatever. So I was able to then, I would take parts and I would move them around into places that they would fit. And I was, for the first time in all the books I've written, for the first time, I was kind of ruthless with myself and I cut out everything that didn't fit in the book, which is like one of the joys of Substack these days, is like stuff that doesn't make the book can end up being a Substack post.
That's true. That's true. So you never actually lose it.
Right, right. I'm still able to put it out there in the world. It's just not in the book. So yeah, I mean, I cut, I don't know, 20,000 words out of the book, which
I was
was
about to
like
say, like, that sounds like a real kill your darlings. Like,
big kill your
yeah.
darlings moment for me because in previous books I'd never had to do that. Sure, I'd had to do a little cutting here and there, but I hadn't like cut out whole chapters.
Yeah.
And I did in this book. Once I found the theme, then I was able to structure the book in a way that made more sense, and then started to become more clear, like what parts no longer fit, what stories no longer fit.
I think it's fascinating because, you know, the conceit of our podcast is that people draw meaning out of the things that they expose themselves to, which we put that on like popular culture. So like movies, TV, books, music, stuff like that. But also life. You draw meaning out of life. And what I appreciated about the books is like this idea of like, well, what does this represent? How did these aspects of my life where I'm finding real insight into how I relate to God, what is the meaning that I'm drawing out of that? Which can be the relationship between you and your dog, right?
Yeah, big time. Like, yeah. It's so funny because the last chapter of the book, I did not want to write it. And that was where I actually made those connections, you know. But the editor was like, you cannot write a book titled The God of Wild Places and not have a chapter titled God. Like, you got to say, who is this God? Who is this God you found in Wild Places? You have to land the plane. I did not want to land the plane and make those connections. And I think, you know, in some ways, I think like that's the least compelling chapter, honestly. It was the hardest to write. I don't love it. This is probably not great selling sales pitch for the book. The other chapter, no, it's fine. But yes, it's interesting that like people really, really connect to the chapter about dogs.
Yeah.
Really connect with it. Like,
Yeah.
people really connect with the chapter on death and talking about the death of my father. So it's like, to your point, it's in the story chapters, not the final didactic chapter, that people have like found the most connection and meaning.
Well, this is where, and listen, editors got to edit. I get it.
Yeah.
Like they got to put out a book that people are going to buy. That's another aspect of our show that we talk about a lot. It's like this idea of commerce and religion, where the two meet and stuff like that. But, you know, it's okay for a mystery to be a mystery. And my God, like God being an ultimate mystery, I know that we need to connect all the dots like every time, right?
I struggled with that. It would have been a real thin book without that last chapter. I get it. But I'm a big fan of that, of writing in such a way that people can draw their own connections. And now I think that was probably my last nonfiction book, and I've been writing fiction and a lot. I mean, spent the last many years writing fiction, none of which is published, so don't look for it on Amazon yet. But fiction, as a novelist, like it's a real. There's so many times there's a fork in the road in writing a scene, and I'm like, do I describe the character, or do I let the reader's imagination come up with the character? Like what his face looks like, how red his skin got during the middle of this argument. You know, there's constant choices in fiction about that. About, do you draw the line from point A to point B, or do you just write point A and write point B, and you know that, you know, you know that the reader's mind and imagination is going to like tie that string from point A to point B. You know, you think about like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, you know, where it's just, I think as a aspiring novelist, like how you write a novel where you are so in love with the characters and the characters are never even named. You don't even know their freaking names. Like, that is a genius novelist who's able to do that. You know what I mean? Not even give them names. So, yeah, I love this challenge in in any kind of creative endeavor of like how much do you show, show don't tell, which is a great like rule of thumb. But it's even in creative nonfiction, I think, in like writing a story. But what? Okay, I mean, this is a long, rambling answer, but I really felt like for some of these scenes in the book we're talking about, I was like, how many of my readers have butchered a deer? Not many.
Right.
So I'm going to be really, really explicit with all of my senses, everything about what it feels like and smells like and looks like to butcher a deer. And yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback on that scene
Yeah,
too,
I bet.
from people who've been like, I've never butchered a deer, I never will butcher a deer, but man, that when you wrote about that, it really, it was hard to turn away. Or some people have been like, I couldn't read that chapter, or I skipped those pages because I don't want to think about where my meat comes from. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's that level of detachment, right? Because it's like people that can't read the chapter but still eat venison. It's like, okay, well, this comes from somewhere, right?
Yeah, of course.
But I will say this: one, I kind of agree with. Listen, I'm the kind of reader that's like, I don't need you to hold my hand. Like, I get it. Like, you're walking me through like what your experience is, and I can extrapolate that out to like what spiritual meaning this may have for you. So much of your story in this book, though, feels, and just like you were talking about with the deer, I mean, the word that comes up is incarnational, right? Like that's the word that we use in church. And I feel like it's something that we're totally afraid of in church communities. Like we try to sort of deny that we have bodies often, or that we have need for food, need for shelter, like all of these simplistic elements that are in your book. When you're sort of confronted with the incarnational stuff, I think that that's really important for people to experience.
Yeah, there was a time 20 years ago when we were like at peak emergent, and I was, top 10 Christian blogger in the world, and everyone was reading my blog every day. And I tried to start a movement because I'm like, well, evangelicals, they stole the word for gospel and they like claimed it. We get to be the evangelicals. And I'm like, mainline? What a terrible like counterpoint to evangelical. So I tried to start a movement that we would call ourselves incarnational Christians. So yeah, you can be evangelical Christians on the right side of the Protestant spectrum, and those of us on the left side, we're not progressives, we're not mainline, we're not liberals, we're incarnational Christians. It didn't catch on, but I mean,
imagine not.
If the Pope had said it or something, maybe it would have, or Jim Wallace, but not little old me, the blogger, So that's always been super important to me. And I think the incarnational aspect of Christianity is severely undervalued. And what it betrays is our Platonism. The non-Christian, non-Hebrew idea that our soul is some immaterial force that is trapped in our flesh and will someday be released to join the eternal mind of God in heaven. Like, yeah, if you're a Platonist, totally. Yeah. If you're a Christian, that's not really in there. I mean, that's not like from the Bible or anything.
Yeah, it allows you to divorce yourself from creation. You get the venison in heaven without having to experience the life on earth.
Right.
The suffering on earth. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I do wonder though, when you talk about this idea of incarnational Christians as part of it, you do a good job of outlining the relationships that you do have in this book, not only with your family, but with your dog. Another sort of mystery that I think really translates, this idea of companionship that we have with other animals and stuff. But there is like an isolating nature to a lot of the things that you describe, like going out, sort of being quiet, waiting for, game foul to come along and stuff like that. Do you find that where you are now on the other side of this book that you miss community? Do you crave community at all?
That's a great question. I hear that a lot from people. Well, I hear it a lot from church people, like, if I left, I would just miss the community so much. And I occasionally hear that from people like me who've left the church and who are like, well, the one thing I don't miss the preaching. I don't miss I don't miss them asking me for money. I don't don't miss the boring prayers. I just miss the community. Well, there's a lot of ways to have community in the world. And frankly, I mean, voluntary communities are breaking down across our society. That's like the bowling alone phenomenon. It's just happening. It's not just church. It's all sorts of voluntary community breaks down. So it is harder, I think, as a middle-aged guy who works from home. My kids are now out of the house, so it's not like I'm going and sitting in the stands at a hockey game and hanging out with other parents and having a beer after the game. Like, a lot of the built-in community that I had when I was raising kids is gone. So I mean, for me, two things. One is I work really hard at relationships and community, and I'm constantly, like, once a week at minimum, I'm out at happy hour for a beer with a guy. I just do it. I just make it a practice. Yeah. I will not let a week go by without getting together with somebody. And 90% of the time, they're not calling me. I'm initiating, because it's just like a thing that middle-aged white guys struggle with friendship. It's like well established, even in the research, it's well established. The other side of that is that as I've become more comfortable in my own skin, I'm just better at being alone. And, if you read my book, I think you find a pretty anxious young man, a pretty insecure young man who's finding, like, bits of kind of fame in the Christian world, and on airplanes all the time, and in hotel rooms and speaking at conferences and surrounded by people and adulation and stuff like that. And of course, you peel away the layers of the onion on that guy and you find there's just more layers. There's not, like, where's the nut in the middle? Where's the substance? And so nowadays, I'm much more comfortable in my own skin. So whereas in the past, when I was younger, I couldn't sit in a deer stand for all day, 6 hours. I'd go mental, Now I look forward to those moments. I look forward to going up to our Courtney and I'll go up to this family lake cabin that I write about in the book for the 4th of July. We will stay one night because it's packed with family and little kids, and it's just a complete madhouse. Yeah. And I'm becoming more and more like my dad, who liked to go up there and be up there alone. I love being up there alone. That is just my favorite. Me and the dog, I will always have a dog with me. But yeah, so I'm becoming better at being alone.
I mean, gosh, that's so, like, that's another thing that I really appreciated from the book is, you were talking about the hustle of life, right? That idea of, I think Richard Rohr even talks about that idea of when you're young, you learn the rules and you just sort of apply them until you just, like, try to amass all of this stuff. And there comes a point of your journey where, like, the stuff doesn't really mean anything, It's like, you're like, wait, who am I? I do like this idea that, a journey can take you to places that you never even thought that it could take you. And sometimes that's, away from what you thought was your passion at the very beginning of your career. This thing about speed, though, because this is something that Ryan and I keep running into. So we're doing a project right now on the rising number of pilgrims around the world. Why are people doing religious pilgrimage, right?
Yeah.
Getting out here and walking. And I think speed may be part of it. I think that we live in a world that's so fast that there's something holy about slowing down. And I wonder if that's what you're finding in the deer stands and stuff like that, is just the ability to
yeah.
just not be fasting for a while.
Yeah, look, I mean, our ancestors had to walk to get from point A to point B. We no longer have to walk. And we don't have to hunt for our food, and we don't have to fish for our food. We just can go to the grocery store and buy it in saran wrap. So the stuff that people are doing when they voluntarily set out on a pilgrimage is very similar to what I'm doing when I'm choosing to hunt for my own food and do my own butchery and prepare my own food and stuff like that. I'm making a conscious choice. It's a countercultural choice. Is it holy? That lies in the eye of the beholder. I think it's holy if you are deliberate about it, because I mean there are people who could go on a pilgrimage, and all their way to Santiago could just be like getting hammered every night on the free wine in the hostel. You know what I mean? Like they could be like, this is just a friggin' month-long party, man. This is crazy.
Yeah, where I don't take showers and yeah.
Yeah, right. It's like, and nobody, yeah, right. Or you could be very deliberate in that pilgrimage, thinking about where you're going with every step and about the people who've walked this same path before you and what parts of your life you want to leave behind and what parts of your life you're walking into. And like, there are ways to be spiritually deliberate. It's like anything else. Hunting is a practice, and, it's not hard to go on Instagram or YouTube and find videos or watch the Outdoor Channel for a couple hours. And you see guys who are like, whisper, 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 bang, they shoot a huge buck. They high five. Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Let's go. Let's go. They're high fiving.
Right.
They're taking selfies with the deer. And so that's like, yeah, that's that. I don't consider that kind of hunting in any way spiritual or practice or discipline, so it's about being deliberate, whether it's a pilgrimage, when anytime we step out of modernity and kind of step back in time for a practice, maybe it's pilgrimage, or maybe it's taking a 3-day silent retreat. Like, who does that? Who does that?
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, right. I mean, our ancestors spent a lot of time in silence.
Yeah.
Our ancient ancestors, a lot of time in silence. They had no podcast to listen to. When they walked from one village to another and it took a week, they were in silence the whole time. And so we're making these deliberate choices to like kind of step out of modernity. And I just think all that to say, whatever it is, hunting, pilgrimage, or anything else, it takes being deliberate. That's the key.
I do wonder, when you were talking about the hunting videos and stuff, I was thinking of like the non-hunting, I don't know, let's lump them as progressives too, that would see your book, that would naturally think, oh, I wonder if this is just going to be like some sort of hyper masculine message. Do you think that there's something about like hunting life and stuff that carries with it just sort of a preconceived notion that you are a certain type of person?
Yeah, of course. I mean, just look at some of the reviews on Amazon and Goodreads.
Oh, I haven't seen them.
Yeah, I mean, some people are like, I didn't know this book was going to be all about hunting and killing animals. If I'd known that, I wouldn't have bought it, this kind of thing. It's like, well, do a little due diligence. Yeah, of course. I mean, hunting has primarily been a masculine endeavor. That stretches way back. Not to say women haven't done it and been a part of it, but even in ancient societies, part of the division of labor was a lot of the men went out and hunted. Men are just, physically stronger. So they were probably more adept at things like running down big game and spearing big game and stuff like that. And women were very much part of the process of the butchering and the preparation of the meat and the hide and stuff like that. Though obviously we don't have to, that is no longer the case. And I'm happy to report that the fastest growing segment of hunters is women hunters in America. And I every year I hunt with women, first time hunters and veteran hunters, and I love it. And so some of that is breaking down. It still has that like lingering masculine kind of vibe to it for sure, but like the organization I'm a part of, that I'm on the Minnesota board of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and we're an organization that's like very deliberate about recruiting women hunters, and same I'm in Pheasants Forever as well, and Pheasants Forever is probably even more successful at recruiting women into upland game hunting. So some of those old stereotypes are being broken down, which is nice.
Yeah. I do wonder, yeah, when you talk about sort of increased community and stuff, one of the things that I was introduced to over the last year, which I think is a growing area, this kind of speaks to your incarnational church idea, actually, is the Wild Church Network. Have you ever heard? Have you heard of this? Which crosses denominations.
Started by a seminary classmate of mine. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So an interdenominational idea of just like people finding themselves, or at least finding sort of spiritual language and just being outdoors, and being in community outdoors. What do you think it is about being outside that is a natural place for people to search for the divine?
Well, again, I mean, to I sound like a broken record, but it's just like that's what our ancestors did. That's what those who went before us, they just were outside. You know, they didn't, if they had a hut or a yurt or a teepee that they lived in, that they slept in at night, or that they sought shelter in from the elements or whatever, that wasn't where they spent the majority of their time, inside of a teepee. You know, they spent the majority of their time outside. They really did feel one with the wild. And so, yeah, I think that any church community that does that is going to find some resonance with people. But again, it's super countercultural because we have so acclimated people to like, well, I want to sit in a pew with a cushion and a comfortable cushion and a really good PA system. And, oh, if I couldn't hear you today, preacher, you got to work on the sound system. I really need to be able to hear every syllable you say. You know, you're like, oh, people used to really have to strain to hear, you know, this kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, the Wild Church Network is not like, it's not taking the church world by storm or anything, but I'm glad it exists. Yeah.
Yeah, I you know, to that end, what you're saying about sort of the institution and the building of church, right? As an Episcopalian, we use the term liturgy to talk about our style of worship all the time, this idea of work of the people. And yet, if you go into those buildings, most of what you're going to see is performance, right? Entertainment.
That work of the people is such bullshit. For Episcopalians to say that and then say only the person who's been to seminary gets to wear the fancy clothes and say the magic words over the magic bread and the magic juice, it's ridiculous. It is not the work of the people. Yes, of course, that's the root of the word, but that's no longer what that word means. The word liturgy, you ask any Episcopalian, and they're like, what's the liturgy? Oh, that's all the stuff the priest says from up in front behind the altar rail. I can't even go up there, you know? I mean, it's truly ridiculous in my, you know, anti-ecclesial kind of understanding of the world. I and a lot of my friends are Episcopal, so I mean, when I preach, it's usually at an Episcopal church because they're the only churches that are like liberal enough to have me. But yeah, I wish it were the work of the people. That's what it should be. And I mean, you'd think at some point the Episcopal Church will hit the panic button because the numbers are dropping so precipitously. Right. At some point, I would think. I mean, unfortunately, there's just still so much money in tech right now that, you know, Trinity Wall Street alone could probably keep the denomination running for a few decades. Between Trinity Wall Street and the Lilly Endowment, the Episcopal Church has been on palliative care for a while.
I do wonder though if like that's the broken connection, right? Like people are like, I can go outside of these walls and I can actually find something to do. When I'm in here, all I'm doing is just like
Receiving.
watching people perform.
Yeah, receiving. And of course, that's much easier for people to receive than to be actively engaged. And frankly, it's the reason why, as small as the Episcopal Church is, it's still a hell of a lot bigger than the Quakers. Because if you go to a Quaker Friends meeting, you're expected to participate. You know what I mean? Like
Maybe, or just sit,
or sit there. But
or just sit in silence. Yeah.
Yeah, but the point being, like, it's not a performance. You're not here to receive. You're here to listen. And if God says something to you, you must feel some kind of compunction to get up and say it.
Yeah, you
And
got
that's
the,
like, no, I go to church to sit in the back pew and listen.
right. Right. I mean, you got to let that inner light out if you're a Quaker, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But no, I do wonder if there's something. I mean, when you were talking about, as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate these things. I wonder if there's something generational about, Gen Xers, millennials raised in the church who have just become so disillusioned by the institution that they figure there's got to be another way to connect that's out there somehow.
I mean, yes to the first half of that sentence. I'm a part of a thing called the Nuns Project, which you can look up at thenunsproject.com, NONES. And the second part of that project, the second part of your sentence, the data we're finding in our surveys of nuns in America, we did the largest ever survey of non-religious Americans, and no, a lot of them don't feel like they're missing anything. They're not like, I'm going to leave the church and I'm going to fill that void in my life with something else. Like one of the phrases we've been batting around as kind of like a major thesis of our project is the myth of the God-shaped hole. We were all taught that growing up in church. Oh, everybody's got a God-shaped hole, and
that's recovery language too.
Yeah, you might fill it with drugs, or you might fill it with sex or whatever, but the only thing that fits in that hole is God. And I guess, you could say that because it's purely hypothetical. That's like a not a statement you could obviously ever empirically prove. But what we found is a lot of non-religious Americans, like tens of millions of non-religious Americans, they do not miss religion at all. They don't miss God. They don't miss spiritual. They're not flipping tarot cards or burning sage or doing yoga to replace what used to be there in church. They're just like happy agnostics. Frankly, that's not great news for me either, because I would love it if a lot of people were like, I also find God in nature, and I bought 10 copies of your book to gift all my friends, like that's what I would love if people did that. But I think a lot of people are just like pretty happy and don't really miss the church or whatever that was. Way back to your earlier question about community, like a lot of people don't really miss it seems.
Was this your first memoir?
Yeah.
How did it feel to write it?
It was super hard.
Yeah.
I've never worked harder on a book longer. It's the hardest I've ever worked on a book, the longest I've ever worked on a book, and it's my shortest book. So it's remember the old saying from Mark Twain? He wrote, sorry I wrote such a long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. And I really learned that I learned in writing this book the power of revision and the power of just like over and over. I can't say this about any other book I've written. Every sentence in that book I looked at, I thought about, I wondered, could I write this sentence better? Is this sentence communicating what I want? That was a great process. If I won the lottery and could afford to write like that, I would write like that, and I'd, no offense, never do another podcast again to try to promote it. You know what I mean? Like that was true joy, to be able to write like that and totally immerse myself in the words I loved it. I really, really loved it.
Was it cathartic? Just being able to let it out.
Cathartic, sure. I think it was cathartic once it was over. It was, in some ways, while I was writing it, it was kind of terrifying because there were things in there that I'd never spoken out loud before. I mean, like when my mom read the manuscript, there were things she was like, I can't believe you wrote that, or I can't believe that happened to you and I didn't know it. So there were some, fairly terrifying passages in there. I guess cathartic somewhat. That's not totally the word I would use, because it's not like, I think in a catharsis, that would be more of a feeling of like I would finish it and get it out there and be like, oh my God, what a relief.
Unburdened, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm released from all that stuff that I've done or whatever. It doesn't really feel like that, because I feel like a lot of it is still with me. I just am like kind of proud that I was able to pull it off, honestly.
Tony Jones, thank you so much for your time.
Oh yeah,
we had a nice long conversation.
Goes by fast.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. The God of Wild Places, available at your local bookstore. Do you care if people buy it on Amazon, or do you not like it?
No, I don't care. I mean, I if you want to buy a signed copy, you can buy it at godofwildplaces.com, but right. Amazon's fine, and the Audible is fine, and wherever. I get I get my 16 cents per book no matter what.
I love it. Thanks for inviting us into your life.
It's great to be back on your pod. Yeah.